Hello, happy Monday. You can tell it's Monday because I washed my hair. All right, I got an email here from Jessie. So she says she has a question. I get extremely anxious before meals. Sorry, that's Stinky playing with his little cat ball that you can hear, the jingling. I get extremely anxious before meals when I'm not feeling hungry. This includes hidden mental breakdowns in the bathroom before meals because I'm afraid of not eating intuitively will make me, in inverted commas, fat. Any tips on how to cope with eating when you're not that hungry? First of all, fat is nothing to be afraid of. All right. The main question, though, is how to cope with eating when you're not hungry. Intuitive eating. Hate that word. It's just eating, actually, isn't it? If you are eating when you want to eat, what you want to eat, how much you want to eat, that's just eating. We don't need to slap intuitive in front of it and then market it and sell it as a brand. But anyway, intuitive eating is just fine when you're hungry. You should absolutely do that. If you are thinking about food, you're hungry and you should eat. If your stomach is rumbling, you are hungry and you should eat. However, if you are not hungry and you have an eating disorder and you're underweight, you should still eat. So it's kind of one-sided, really, isn't it? Problem is that for many of us, our hunger cues are not steadfast and reliable when you have an eating disorder. And I go into why that is in great detail in Rehabilitate, Rewire, Recover. Anyway, though, long story short, you can't trust your hunger cues, not physical ones at least, when you are in malnutrition. So you often have to force feed yourself above your level of hunger. The second part of that is that mental hunger counts as hunger. Many of us don't have physical hunger cues, but we do have mental hunger cues. That's thinking about food, planning food, thinking about exercise so you can eat more food. All of that is actually hunger. So for most of us, we might not have, you might be able to say, okay, I don't have physical hunger cues, but for most of us, when you're underweight, you have got mental hunger, whether you like to admit that or not. It's there, and a lot of the time you don't like to admit it because it's scary as hell, but it's there, and you have to count mental hunger as hunger. So then when you're sort of like, I'm not hungry, it's like, well, is that true? Actually, if you've been thinking about food and stuff like that all day, then you are hungry. Sometimes that acknowledgement makes it easier to eat. Now, the thing is with anorexia, and you guys know that I look at it from a biological and take in the evolutionary migration theory of anorexia. And the thing is here, it's like, think about it this way. Your body thinks that you should be migrating because there's a famine. Migrating animals eat only what they need to eat in order to survive that day and keep going. So for your brain, if you're not physically hungry, it's like a big no-no for you to stop and eat, which is problematic. And that's why your brain pitches such a fit about it, because your brain's like, are you fucking kidding? You're stopping and eating and you're not even hungry? We've got to go. That's kind of what your brain does when you have anorexia. And our brains use emotion to motivate behavior, so your brain uses negative emotions to motivate you not to stop and eat if you're not ravenously hungry. Problem with that is that if you were in a famine environment and having to migrate, then you would migrate like a very good little migrator. You'd be the best migrator out there. But the problem with it is you're not, and you have anorexia in the modern environment, which is not a famine environment, and there's no natural shut-off point, because usually if you're in a famine, you get to the end of the famine, it'll be like boom, done, everybody would be feasting. You've got to do that feast even though you're not in an actual famine. And so our brains are looking for the feast to end the famine. What most of us find is even when you're not hungry, if you start eating, you get hungry, which makes perfect sense because your brain's like, well, there's no point in being hungry when there's no food around. And then you start eating, and your brain's like, God, there's food around, quick, got to get as much in as possible. Then you start eating. The key there is that not when you start eating and you get hungry, the key there is to allow yourself to keep eating and eat as much as possible and take advantage of that feeling hungry, whether or not your judgment says it's okay or not. All right, I've rambled on. So have I actually answered the question, what do you do to cope when you're not hungry? You've got to tell yourself that, okay, my brain's freaking out about this, but that's just because my brain thinks that I'm in a famine and I need to migrate, and thank you very much, brain, but I'm not. I need to eat food, I need to get out of malnutrition, and that's going to switch off that famine response. So that's one way of looking at it, when your brain's freaking out, understanding why your brain is freaking out, and it's just doing its job. Well done, little brain, but it's a little bit misguided in our last 100 years or so where we haven't had threat of famine in the Western world. And so you're just like, thank you very much, brain, for freaking out and letting me know, but I'm just going to override that and continue and eat as much as possible. And then, you know, it's understanding that a lot of recovery, especially in the early stages, especially when your hunger's not there, you're going to have to force feed yourself. Otherwise, what the fuck are you doing? Otherwise, you're just staying exactly where you are and nothing's changing, and this is going to go on for years. So grit your teeth, knuckle down, get out of the bathroom, get in there and start eating a lot of food.